What's up, everybody? Welcome to the next episode of Bassin Biology. I'm your host, Thad Moody, and we're in a little bit of different recording studio today. We're visiting my parents, and if you will look behind me, past that tree line, about 1,000 yards, you get past the wild pigs, cottonmouths, and the occasional gator. There's a river, and that's where I really cut my teeth on fishing and learning a lot. Today's episode, we're going to talk about bait and how fish hunt and why stuff looks and does the way it does. First off, huge shout out to some of the people who make this possible for me, fishing and recording for a living. Lowrance, Spear Point Hooks, of course Tactical Fishing Company, use T Moody 10 for 10% off, and then True Dave, use Thad Moody Outdoors for 15% off your order. And last but not least, Redfin Sunglasses, fantastic sunglasses, highly recommend them, made in America. Lenses are made by Zeiss, excellent company. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of today. My notes are over here so I don't get them wet. As you can see, I'm chilling in the pool, even in my, gotta get the money's worth in the robe. So, how fish hunt, quick overview. We're going to be looking at a study done by Virginia Tech on different sensory organs and different ways that fish use their senses and their unique sensory organs and visual sight and stuff to hunt. And again, it's a lot different than our hearing, sound, and taste. But to start off with, their vision, of course, they have a different rod and cone setup, which we're going to get into a little more and how that affects the way the bait looks and everything. Next off, their lateral line, of course, which is, you'll see a line a lot of times down the fish, normally down the rib section, which is directly through that is normally your spinal column. Do you use that lateral line to hunt in darker, situations, murkier waters, and that picks up vibration. They also pick up vibration through their inner ear bones. Their setup is kind of like ours. It's different, but also works in a similar way. They use that to pick up feel vibrations in the water because most people know that vibrations and sound in the water travels a lot quicker than it does the air, which you would think would be the opposite, but it's not. So stuff is louder underwater, it travels further, and it has a different feel to it than it does in the air. And fish use their lateral line and their vision, or their lateral line and their inner ear bone to hunt, which vision and hunting vibration are the two main ways we're going to talk about today when it comes to bait selections. Next, they hunt. Some do hunt with scent. Some do, they have big nostrils that pick up different types of scents and stuff. Whether it be not so much, a lot of times your bass, but your other species, such as catfish. Electrical output. Some, fish species such as your sharks and rays, they can hunt with the electrical outputs. And catfish do too with some of their barbels. Some species of catfish do. That everybody's body, all prey items, stuff, they put out some type of electricity, whether it be your nerves, your brain running, stuff like that. So they put it out, hang out with that, and some fish can hunt with that. And finally, barbels. Y'all know them as the whiskers on the catfish. They do hunt with that a lot. That is one way species in very murky water can hunt and find prey when it's dark, stuff like that. They're barbels. Alright, so that kind of gives us a quick overview. If you have more questions on that, there's a fantastic study that goes into a lot more depth into some of these sensory things that we're going to talk about today. It's at Virginia Tech. It's a great scientific study and explains a lot, and even in some aspects goes into why different lure selections work they do or how some baits can affect. Which I always recommend, while color or shape and color is one thing, and we see a bait and it's like, oh, that would look really good because it looks like what we see at crawfish. A fish's perspective is not the same as ours. We're going to get into that today. So the two main ways we're going to talk about today about fish, the way they hunt and stuff like that, is going to be through their vision and the lateral line, the vibration. That's what we're going to get into. So let's start off with vision. Just like our eyes, a lot of fish have rods and cones. Of course, all fish have rods and cones. But the rod and cone setup and the rod and cone cells are a little bit different than what we know in the human eye. Fish's perspective is not the same as ours when it comes to finding prey and hunting with their eyes. They have a much different rod and cone setup. And the rod and cone setup can even vary from fish to fish. If you look at a largemouth bass and you look in its eye, it doesn't have a lot of, it doesn't have nearly as many rod cells, which is what helps pick up the light, as say a walleye does, big deep water predators. You look at a walleye's, if you shine a flashlight on the water at night, you can see the walleye's reflective eyes very easily compared to like a largemouth bass or a catfish. And then you look at fish like catfish, who have smaller beady eyes because they use, I say beady eyes, that's kind of rude, they just have smaller eyes, because they use their barbels, their whiskers, their sense of smell and stuff like that to hunt a lot more than their vision, because they hunt a lot of times, a lot of them are bottom feeders, some like the flathead catfish, or the Wells catfish are predators, but they use their barbels to pick up vibration and scent, and even the electricity put off from a body, much more than, say, your largemouth bass does. And here in the South, a lot of people do catfish. That's why you see them every now and then fishing with chicken livers, cut bait, stuff like that for the scent it gives off. But you will also see people, bass fishermen, I've caught catfish on crankbaits, chatterbaits, and recently on a bubblegum shaky head worm made by Tactical Fishing Company. We're going to look at that today too. So they probably picked the worm up as it was dropping. The little bit of movement it did see was dropping, the color, the scent from coming off, and that's how it picked it up. And fish use that, and they look differently. The way some people wonder why this bait works and this other bait don't, even though the bait may look very realistic, the color scheme of it may not appear the same. Because just like fishes, their rods and cones are set up differently than ours. As you descend in water, colors change. People always wonder why bright chartreuse catches fish. Well, at depth, you go 3, 4, 5 feet down, that chartreuse is no longer bright green as we, see it on the surface. It turns into more of a silver color. It actually looks a lot more like a bait fish color than it does on the surface. Like this chartreuse in black, you go 5 foot down, it's not look chartreuse in black. It has a different color scheme to it, because as stuff descends into the water filters out different light waves. It filters out different light waves and makes things look different. The deeper you go, the more colors change. One of the first colors that you'll see change from what we see on the surface to like a darker color or blue or black is red. Red, the second it hits the water and drops down, it changes colors drastically. And other colors look like different colors underwater. Chartreuse can look silvery or blue underwater. And that's kind of why colors like that work. We've always kind of wondered that. So when these fish, sorry, I gotta get just back over here to get some of my stuff. When these fish are hunting, let's take this Tactitoad by Tactical Fishing. If you run it on a buzz bait for like a buzz toad, it's going the vibration from the blades and stuff, that's going to put a lot of vibration. It's going to attract the fish. And they'll see that white belly, which on the surface it looks like a white belly frog. So that looks like your standard leopard frog or something you'd see, or bullfrog up here in Mississippi. Alright? But sometimes a solid white toad is fantastic on a buzzbait as well. Again, when that fish, that bass or whatever hits it, feels vibration, hears the vibration, looks up at it, and sees the outline of that bait on there, it makes it, triggers a predatory response on it. These crawfish here, it's got a white belly, and it's got a green pumpkin overtone on it. While on the surface, that looks like it could almost mimic a brim, a crawfish, a frog, all kind of different things. And it's a punch bug, so when it's going in the water, the color variation is a little different, the movement's a little different. People wonder, there's nothing really that looks like this particular bug other than maybe a crawfish underwater. But even areas that don't have high crawfish, fish hit it. Well, the color pattern and color scheme mimics other bait fish, and just the movement alone can trigger a predatory response. So when you're choosing your baits, it's not always what you see on the surface you need to look at when it comes to color and using a fish's visual keys in order to catch them. Like this right here, a paddle tail. This plays off a couple aspects of the way fish hunt. With the lateral line, again, the lateral line is a giant bundle of nerves that run along the side of fish on both sides that's connected straight to their spinal column. And they will use that to hunt, especially at night, low light situations, and murky water. And we're going to get to that in a bit, why some baits. But this paddle tail right here, it gives off the visual cues of different bait fish. Now, this could mimic some different sunfish. It could mimic a herring. It can mimic a shad. But it also has that paddle tail that puts off vibration, and fish will feel that with their lateral line. So this is using two different ways that fish hunt, both with the lateral line of vibration, the inner ear, as well as a visual cue. So that's always a good. If you can get a fish to bite from, or get you a bait that has more than one reaction behind it, that's always fantastic. Ups your chances. Now, stick bait. Right here, we have the Swagger Stick by Tactical Fishing Company. What in the water looks like this? Other than the few worms that you will see in the water, and yes, there are worms in the water, there ain't much that looks like that. Straight up. But, again, things to a bass look different underwater. Had a spider on me. Things look different underwater for a bass. Alright, that right there, when it falls, and it has that right there, it could be a bait fish on the side. Could be a salamander, could be a newt, could be a tadpole, could be a small snake. And when it twitches, it looks like something's dying or trying to move or something like that. And that, triggers a predatory response in that bass. And because it's slow sinking, because Swagger sticks are salted. Are they salted for scent and stuff? They're salted more to control the fall rate of the bait. This has a quicker fall rate than some, but slower than, say, a Yamamoto Cinco. So it's got a great fall rate because of the salt mixture in it. And as it slow falls and you twitch it, that little bloop, bloop, because in the water when it falls it's going to look like this right here. When you twitch it, it looks like a panicking newt or salamander or bait fish or tadpole, something like that, and it triggers a predatory response. It's not so much giving off the vibrations on the lateral line, but it is triggering a predatory response from visual cues, which is very important. People always wonder why stick baits catch so much fish. Well, it's because to a bass this doesn't look like just a worm. The way their cones are set up, which the rods help capture the visual, like the cones more in detail and the actual picture of things, set up differently than ours. So this looks different to a fish. There's a great book. I cannot remember exactly who wrote it. They're very hard to come by. I've only ever seen it once in person from one of my fisheries professors. That goes into great depth and detail on why a fish's rods and cones help them see the way they do, and why different baits trigger different predatory responses. And it goes into great detail on stick baits. That paper from Virginia Tech also goes into pretty good detail on why visual cues like that set up the way they do. Of course, you have your crawl baits like this, your crawfish baits. You don't see a ton of green crawfish, but underwater it looks different underwater to them. So that kind of gives us a few things on the visual cue, and we're going to go back to that on there. Sorry, it's hot out here. We're still in Mississippi in July, boys and girls. It is hot. So while visual cues can be very important when it comes to fishing, especially when you're fishing in clear water, down here in the South we have very, very murky water. And you will see, even at just subsurface, where are they at? A black and blue will mimic a green pumpkin sunfish or a red ear or a bluegill better than the actual green pumpkin swagger stick will. That's because when it's very murky, especially low light, early morning or late afternoon, murky water, they're seeing more of the outline than they're seeing a twitch and outline more than anything. And it's not so much in depth with the exact color. They're not saying, oh, that is black and blue. They're seeing more of an outline, more of a bait fish pattern. There's like oh, that's twitching, it's small, and I can fit it in my mouth. I see that now. I'm going to eat it. When we think about fish, we have to think the way their brain works, and their brains are very small. And yes, I know people say, well, big fish didn't get big fish by being dumb, and that's correct. They didn't. But they also will swipe at or strike a piece of plastic worm that is bright bubblegum pink. Now, I'm not really sure why bubblegum pink works really good for some bass, but it definitely does. It's a fantastic bait color, really. But down here, if it's somewhat murky and the sun is up, I will throw green pumpkin because it gives off just enough shadow, just enough outline in its murky water that a fish will cue on it. If it's been raining a lot or I'm fishing a little deeper, black and blue because it gives off a better outline in that murky water, fish will cue on it. At night, if you'll throw a lot of your black baits, especially early in the morning fishing just before sunrise, a black bait is fantastic. Black worms when it's really deep, or at night, black crankbait, stuff like that, are fantastic because that dark black outline stands out fantastically well at night for fish for some reason. Again, their cones and rods are different than ours. Now let's look at the lateral line, feeling the vibration. I'm going to try to hold this up close to y'all. This bright silver rattle trap right here, it does have matching colors, silver like a shad. It's got a blue top on it. It's got the little red on the front of it, which could cue for bait fish. Because remember, red's one of the first colors to go away as you go deeper in the water. So, and it's got a black spot on it, which a lot of your bait fish, such as shad and threadfin and gizzard shad have. But hear that? Fish will cue on that, and as it's going through the water, it's going to vibrate. It's going to make noise. It's going to rattle. It's called a rattle trap for a reason. And now they make silent rattle traps. Works better in clear water, but in murky water, going down deep, this right here cues on the fish's lateral line, that vibration feeling. Normally when fish swim around, they don't twitch a whole lot because that puts a more vibration. It lets predators know in the area. Predators know that they're hurt, they're wounded, they're having problems, and that triggers a predatory response. So these high vibration baits do trigger that predator response. Of course, we all know you got the good old-fashioned fire tiger right here. Jerk bait. Again, it's got some rattle in it, and as you jerk it, it's got that fish twitch to it, gives off good vibration. It has fire tiger's been a popular color forever because, again, this does not look bright highlighter colors underwater to a fish. We have to remember that. We're looking at these baits, so it looks like what they want. So that jerk, twitch, jerk mimics a wounded bait fish. Gives off the vibration, quick jerks like that, gives off the vibration, gives off the visual cues of an injured fish. That, again, triggers a predatory response of what we want to do with these baits. The better the trigger of the predatory response, the higher chance that fish is going to bite your lure. Now on the surface, we have, poppers. These don't have anything inside of them. But that big mouth right there, it's like a dead fish twitching on top of the water. Or it can mimic a frog swimming on top of the water. Or it can mimic a baby duck on top of the water. I've seen big bass blow up on baby ducks or small birds. It could be a lizard, trying to stroke through the water. These poppers like this, or these poppers, this is a rebel popper. It's called the Pro Popper. So it mimics all kinds of different things. It may not look, but that doesn't really look like a frog. It's got a bass pattern. Well, it's got a white belly like a frog. Fish sees that. Well, that doesn't really look, that much like a fish. Well, it doesn't have to look exactly like one. It's triggering that predatory response, and it could mimic a couple different baits. But what it's really doing, it's not trying to mimic a frog perfectly or a fish perfectly. It's trying to mimic something on the surface dying that fish may or may not want to eat. And that's the main aspect of it, is trying to trigger that response of that fish's natural instinct. Not so much to look exactly like a bait fish or a prey item, but just enough that the fish thinks it is. Of course, we've got a classic right here. This is it doesn't have a skirt on it currently. but a spinnerbait. Your willow blade here, very shiny, gives off that visual cue of a bait fish swimming around. That plop, 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 plop. Gives off some vibration, but the willow blade is more or less a shiny to get the fish's attention. Then I like to pair them with a Colorado blade right there. The Colorado blade gives off a lot more vibration than the willow blade does. So you've got a visual cue and you got vibration. Of course, then you'll have your trailer, your skirt, that also gives off a big visual cue. But the willow and the Colorado is to get the fish's attention. Once on this part of the hook and stuff is to get it to bite. So you have your attention grabbers and you have it to bite. Think of it like this. With our aspect, with fishermen, we see this big flashy boat. It's got our attention. We see this cool new bait. It's got our attention. We saw this cool stuff at Oddcast. These different things. He's coming out in different ways. It's got our attention. You know, a lot of the baits are sold are not made to catch fish. They're made to catch fishermen. That's just the cold, hard truth of it. A lot of fantastic baits that you would never think would catch a fish, like these swagger sticks, catch the ever-living crap out of bass. I've caught numerous 7, 8, 9 pound bass on baits that really don't look exactly like anything in the water, but they look enough like a few different things in the water to trigger that great predatory response and that bite. And that's the truth of it. Your crawfish, you know, your different crawls, they trigger from both a visual key. Now, some of your jigs nowadays do have the little rattle in them, and that can track that. They have the rattle that attracts them, and the fish sees that visual cue. Your vibration attracts the fish. Your visual cues on them helps to distinguish that is a predator, prey animal, and that fish can go over there and eat it. So as you see different baits and stuff progress, we see a change in things, and which we've somewhat seen with baits here lately. You know, front-facing sonar has become extremely popular. I'm gonna say probably 50% of kayak fishermen and boat fishermen have on their boats now. Well, this little minnow doesn't give off vibration, doesn't give off a huge attractant, but we can see that fish and put this in front of them and work it like a prey item, and it gives off a little vibration, a little bit of a cue, but it's more of a visual bait being right there at it because you can see where to cast, as opposed to, say, those of us who fish without front-facing sonar. Again, I fish both, where we throw these deep cranks out there because we don't know where the fish is in the open water, and you have that vibration, you have the visual cue, you're trying to attract the fish and let it know it's coming through there, as opposed to using front-facing sonar and seeing it. So that also has a lot to do with your bait choices. Whether you're using front-facing sonar or not, whether you're effective with it or not. What bait, if you want to try and get a fish to bite off a visual cue being right there at it, or using the lateral line and the vibrations to bring that fish closer to let it know there's a wounded bait fish, where it goes hunting with the lateral line and sees it, puts both cues together and bites it. You have to take into all these factors when doing your bait selections. Now finally, do one of my favorite little baits here. It's a simple jig, weedless jig. So this bait right here has no sound, nothing. What makes it effective is all that skirt and stuff flapping and moving around in the water, the trailer you have on it moving around in the water. So it gives off a big visual cue. Now, if you throw the right trailer on there as it's flapping around like a crawfish or one of these bugs, where the fins do give off movement in the water, even small movement like that can trigger some type of vibration that can let the fish know that's there. But they're based more on a visual presentation. They're pretty quiet. They don't have a huge profile when it comes to hitting the water and stuff. But they are an absolute fantastic bait because of the skirtiness, the moving around. Looks like a crawfish skirting on the bottom, or a bait fish flopping on the bottom, or anything like that. So again, visual cue. So today we've kind of gone over different visual cues, how fish hunt using their lateral lines, vibration, and visual cues. All those are big factors when it comes to choosing your baits. Now, the same bait's not going to work the same in every body of water. When I fished Guntersville versus when I fish a lake, some lakes here in Mississippi, Guntersville's a lot clearer versus, let's say, a Lamar Bruce, which is a mud bottom. Not a lot of grass, mud bottom. It fishes a whole lot differently. I have to use a lot more vibration, a lot more movement, a lot more boldness in Lamar Bruce than, say, when I was throwing a swagger stick in 20 feet of water, letting it slowly sink and twitching it. Those fish have a lot more visual prowess in Guntersville because of how clear the water is. They can see a lot further than they can the chocolate milk that I fish in a lot of places here in Mississippi. So the body of water has a lot to do with your lure choice and color. Whether you're fishing murky, you know you're going to need a darker color or a bait that puts off a ton of vibration. If you're going to have a Colorado and willow blade combination, or if you're going to have a double Colorado blade, whereas, you know, fishing places like Guntersville or parts of Chickamauga or you know, even the Five Fingers up in New York or the Delta, where it's a little more clear in some places, your double willow blade. The chatterbait is a great example for one. It puts off a ton of vibration, ton of movement. That's why it's such an effective bait in my mind, because you can put great visual prowess on it with different colors and combinations. It has a blade that's very bright, but it just gives a ton of vibration. So knowing what kind of lake you are in, as opposed to just throwing the same thing in every lake, really becomes a factor when you're fishing and fishing hard. Your bait selection, your color, your vibration is all determining factors. And even your time of day and light. When it's really cloudy, I like using a bone color or white, you know, bait, especially on top water. If it's really cloudy, I'm throwing a white buzz toad, a white buzz bait, a white spook, a bone spook, a silver spook, something like that has a much lighter profile that stands out against the sky. When it's bright and sunny outside, that white kind of blends in with the sun. So even though they may be attracted to the noise and vibrations putting up on top, the targeting isn't always there. So when it's bright and sunny outside, I will throw, or it's pitch black, I will throw a black buzzbait, a black walking spook, a black frog, a black pawpaw, because the way the light set up as well can affect that. Think of it this way. The reason a great white shark and a largemouth bass are dark on top with a white belly is because if you look down into the depths, you see darkness. That great white shark is camouflaged from a prey item looking down. That largemouth bass is camouflaged from a prey item looking down. White bellies, that prey item's looking up. That bass is camouflaged. White on white sky, white on a sunny sky. Really hard to pick out. Same with the great white shark, white on white looking up. You may see somewhat of an outline, but it's more distortion because of the color blends in with each other. Again, a fish's rods and cones, both prey and predator, are not the same as ours. They don't see the world like I do, so that's something we have to take into account when we're looking at bait selections. Alright, we've covered color, we've colored different colors for lakes, we've colored vibration, we've colored hunting patterns and stuff like that. We're going to close this out with the biggest piece of advice that I've ever been told when it comes to making bait selection, and that is, when in doubt, match the hatch. If a lake is full of bluegill, throwing a shad ain't always going to work. If a lake has no bluegill in it and it's full of yellow perch, throwing a bait such as fire tiger is going to match the hatch. If there aren't any frogs in there, throwing a walking frog or a swimming frog probably not going to be really effective. And if an area has no prey fish like you would think, and it's mainly a crawfish area, like all your smally places are in these small creeks, jerkbait may work, but a crawfish patterned crankbait or a crawfish patterned crawl may work a lot better. Match the hatch, guys and gals. It is guaranteed to work 90% of the time. It'll work 100% of the time, 90% of the time. Matching the hatch is your best option, no matter what. You're going to fish these lakes, research the prey items that's in them, and that will help you narrow down your bait selection. Once you can match a prey item that's in the lake, matching your bait selection becomes a whole lot easier. And then once you know how the clarity of that lake is, choosing vibration versus soft plastic versus solid crankbaits becomes a lot easier. So that's it for today. I'm fixing to hang out and lounge in this pool a little more with the swans here. Be good, take a kid fishing, and remember, be a great conservationist so the next generation can enjoy what we all do. Y'all have a wonderful day, night, morning, whenever you're watching this, and we'll see you next time. Adios.